The certified letter trembled in my hands as I read the words that would change everything. Karen Whitmore, HOA president, was demanding I pay $15,000 in fines and remove the gate from my own property. The gate I had built on my own land with my own money, leading to my own driveway. I looked up at my beautiful ranch, 40 acres of rolling hills and oak trees that I had worked 20 years to afford. Then I looked back at the letter. Karen had made one critical mistake. She had pushed the wrong person too far. 3 months later, I owned the street her house sat on, and I was about to triple her HOA dues. 23 years of 12-hour days. 23 years of building my construction business from nothing. 23 years of dreaming about the day I could finally buy my own piece of land and build the home I had always wanted. That day came on a crisp October morning when I signed the papers for 40 acres of the most beautiful property I had ever seen. Rolling hills covered in native grass, mature oak trees that had stood for decades, a natural creek that ran along the eastern boundary, and the perfect spot on a gentle rise where I would build my dream home. The property sat at the end of Maple Grove Lane, a quiet street that dead-ended at my front gate. The previous owner had used the land for cattle, and there was already a gravel road leading from the main street directly to where I planned to build. Perfect access, perfect privacy, perfect everything. I spent months working with architects and engineers. Every detail had to be right. The house would face east to catch the morning sun. The garage would be large enough for my work trucks, and the driveway would connect directly to Maple Grove Lane through a custom iron gate that would mark the entrance to my property. The construction took 8 months. I was out there every day, working alongside my crew, making sure every board was straight and every nail was driven true. This was not just another job. This was my home, my legacy, the place where I would finally rest after decades of hard work. The gate went up on a Tuesday in March. Hand-forged iron with my family name worked into the design. It opened automatically with a remote control, and it was beautiful. I stood there that evening, watching the sun set behind my new home, feeling proud of what I had accomplished. 2 weeks later, I found the first violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper. The letter was from the Shadow Creek Homeowners Association. I had to read it 3 times before I understood what it was saying. According to the HOA, my gate was in violation of community standards. It had not been approved by the Architectural Review Board, and I had 30 days to remove it or face daily fines. I called the number on the letter immediately. A woman answered on the second ring. Shadow Creek HOA, this is Karen Whitmore speaking. This is about the violation notice on my gate, I said. There must be some mistake. This is my private property. Her voice turned cold immediately. Sir, when you bought your property, you agreed to abide by all HOA covenants and restrictions. Your gate is non-compliant and it needs to be removed. Non-compliant with what? It is on my own land. The gate faces a community street, which makes it subject to our architectural standards. You should have submitted plans for approval before construction. I hung up the phone and walked outside to look at my gate again. It sat 20 feet back from the street on my own property. There was no way this could be legal. That night, I pulled out my deed and started reading. Buried in page 47 of the legal documents was a single paragraph about HOA membership. I had signed it without really understanding what it meant. Karen Whitmore had just declared war on the wrong person. The HOA regulations were 38 pages of the most ridiculous rules I had ever seen. According to Section 12, Subsection 4, Any structure visible from a community street had to be approved by the Architectural Review Board. This included gates, fences, mailboxes, and even garden decorations. My gate, sitting on my own property, somehow fell under their authority because it could be seen from Maple Grove Lane. I called Corinne back the next morning, hoping to find a reasonable solution. "What exactly do you want me to do?" I asked. "Remove the gate entirely, or replace it with something from our approved vendor list," she said. "The current gate is too ornate and does not match the community aesthetic." I looked at the list she emailed me. The approved gates were cheap aluminum pieces that looked like they belonged in a trailer park. The cheapest one cost $4,000, and I would have to pay an additional $500 review fee to the HOA. "This is ridiculous," I said. "My gate is beautiful and it is on my own property." "Sir, the covenants are very clear. You agreed to follow these rules when you bought your home." "I want to speak to the HOA board about this." "I am the HOA president. The board supports my decision." The next violation notice arrived 3 days later, then another one the following week. Each one threatened escalating fines if I did not comply. Corinne was charging me $50 per day, and the total was already over $800. I hired a lawyer. Attorney Johnson reviewed my deed and the HOA covenants, then gave me the bad news. The restrictions were legally binding, and the HOA did have authority over structures visible from community streets. "Your best option is to comply with their demands," he said. "Fighting this in court will cost more than just replacing the gate." "This is insane," I said. "It is my own property." "I understand your frustration, but the law is clear. You signed the covenant when you bought the house." The harassment escalated quickly after that. Corinne started driving by my property twice a day, taking pictures of my gate with her phone. She sent certified letters demanding immediate compliance. She threatened to place a lien on my property if I did not pay the accumulated fines. Other HOA board members joined the campaign. I received letters from the vice president, the secretary, and the treasurer. All of them demanded that I follow Corinne's orders and remove my gate. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning in June. I was leaving for work when I found Corinne standing in my driveway, measuring the distance from my gate to the street with a tape measure. "What are you doing on my property?" I demanded. "Documenting violations for our legal case," she said, not looking up from her measurements. "Get off my land right now." She finally looked at me, and I saw the smug satisfaction in her eyes. "You should have followed the rules, Mr. Thompson. Now you are going to pay for your stubbornness." 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. They were filing a lawsuit seeking an injunction to force removal of my gate, plus $15,000 in accumulated fines and legal fees. I sat in my kitchen that night, looking at the legal documents spread across my table. Corinne Whitmore had just cost me my peace of mind, my savings, and my faith in property rights. But she had also made one critical mistake. She had picked a fight with someone who had spent decades learning how to solve problems that other people said were impossible. I opened my laptop and started researching. If Corinne wanted to play legal games, I would show her how the game was really played. I became obsessed with finding a way out of this mess. Every evening after work, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a legal pad, and a pot of coffee. I was going to read every document, every regulation, and every piece of paperwork related to my property and the HOA. The first thing I discovered was that the Shadow Creek HOA had been formed in 1987, when the original developer platted the subdivision. The covenants were supposed to run with the land for 25 years, then automatically renew unless 75% of homeowners voted to dissolve the association. But as I read deeper into the original documents, I found something interesting. The legal description of the HOA's authority referenced properties in Shadow Creek Subdivision, Phase 1. My property was described in my deed as being in Shadow Creek Estates, Phase 2. I spent the next week at the county courthouse, pulling every record I could find. The original plat map from 1987 only showed 43 lots. My property was not even part of the original subdivision. It had been added later when the developer expanded the project. But the HOA covenants had never been updated to include the new properties. According to the legal documents, the association only had authority over the original 43 lots. My heart was racing as I realized what this meant. Corinne had been harassing me for months based on rules that did not even apply to my property. I called Attorney Johnson immediately. "This is very interesting," he said after reviewing my research. "But proving it in court will still be expensive and time-consuming. The HOA will argue that you accepted their authority when you bought the property. But the law is the law, right? If their covenants do not legally apply to my land, then they have no authority over my gate." "That is correct, but you still have to prove it, and HOA cases can drag on for years." I hung up the phone feeling frustrated. I had found the smoking gun, but I still could not afford to fight a legal battle that might last for years. That is when I decided to dig deeper into the HOA's finances and operations. If I was going to be stuck dealing with these people, I wanted to understand exactly how their organization worked. The financial records were public information, and what I found was shocking. The HOA collected over $40,000 per year in dues and fees, but they only spent about $15,000 on actual neighborhood maintenance. The rest went to legal fees, administrative costs, and something called road maintenance reserves. Road maintenance reserves caught my attention because Maple Grove Lane was in terrible condition. The asphalt was cracked and full of potholes. The storm drains were clogged, and there were no street lights or sidewalks despite the fact that homeowners were paying $800 per year in dues. I started researching the ownership of Maple Grove Lane itself. Most people assume that neighborhood streets are owned by the city or county, but that is not always the case. In private subdivisions, the developer often retains ownership of the roads and then transfers them to the HOA or a separate maintenance entity. The records at the courthouse told a fascinating story. When Shadow Creek was originally developed, the builder had created a separate company called Maple Grove Properties, LLC, to own and maintain the private streets. The HOA was supposed to pay this company for road maintenance, but the company had gone out of business in 2003. According to the records, ownership of Maple Grove Lane had been transferred to another LLC called Texas Street Holdings when the original company dissolved. I had never heard of Texas Street Holdings, but a quick internet search revealed that it was a shell company that owned several private roads throughout the state. And according to the business registry, Texas Street Holdings was currently for sale. I sat back in my chair and stared at the computer screen. Corinne Whitmore lived at 1247 Maple Grove Lane. Her house, along with 46 others, could only be accessed by driving on a private road that was owned by a company that was for sale. I picked up my phone and called the number listed for Texas Street Holdings. "Hello, this is David Thompson. I understand your company might be for sale. I am interested in learning more about your road holdings in the Shadow Creek area. 3 hours later, I was on the phone with a lawyer in Austin who represented the owners of Texas Street Holdings. The company owned 1.2 miles of private road in Shadow Creek, including the main street that provided the only vehicular access to 47 homes. "What kind of price are you looking for?" I asked. "$65,000 for the whole package. That includes the road surface, the drainage easements, and all maintenance responsibilities." I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications. If I bought this company, I would own the street that Corinne lived on. I would control the only road that led to her house. "I will need to see all the documentation, but I am very interested," I said. That night, I sat on my front porch looking at my gate. Corinne Whitmore had spent months trying to control what I could do on my own property. Soon, I would control the road that led to hers. I did not sleep that night. My mind was racing with possibilities, but I had to be careful. If Corinne or anyone else in the HOA found out what I was planning, they might try to interfere with the sale or find some way to block the transaction. The first thing I needed was complete documentation of what I would be buying. I hired a different attorney, someone with no connection to my HOA dispute, to review the ownership records and legal structure of Texas Street Holdings. Attorney Martinez was thorough and professional. She spent 2 weeks researching the company, the road ownership, and all the legal obligations that came with owning a private street. "This is legitimate," she told me during our meeting. "Texas Street Holdings has clear legal title to 1.2 miles of private road, including Maple Grove Lane. If you buy the company, you will own the road and have the right to control access and set maintenance fees." "What about the homeowners? Do they have any legal rights to use the road?" "They have what is called an easement for access. You cannot block their access to their homes, but you can set reasonable fees for road maintenance and establish rules for road use." "How much can I charge for maintenance?" "The fees have to be reasonable and based on actual costs. You cannot charge punitive fees just to harass people. But if you can document legitimate maintenance expenses, you can pass those costs on to the road users." I spent the next week getting estimates from paving companies, drainage contractors, and street maintenance services. The current condition of Maple Grove Lane was worse than I had initially thought. The road needed complete resurfacing, new storm drains, and proper grading to handle water runoff. The total cost for bringing the road up to proper standards would be approximately $135,000. Spread across 47 homes, that worked out to about $2,800 per household. The current HOA was only collecting $800 per year from each home, and most of that money was going to legal fees and administrative costs instead of actual road maintenance. I called the owner of Texas Street Holdings and made my offer. "I will pay $70,000 for the company, with closing in 30 days. "That is $5,000 more than my asking price," he said. "Any particular reason for the premium?" "I want to make sure this transaction closes quickly and smoothly. No delays, no complications." "Deal. I will have my attorney prepare the purchase agreement." The next month was the longest of my life. I had to keep my normal routine, going to work every day and pretending that nothing had changed. Corinne continued her harassment campaign, sending me violation notices and threatening letters. She had no idea that I was about to become her landlord. The closing was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a Friday in August. I met Attorney Martinez at the title company office, signed dozens of documents, and wrote a check for $70,000. At 10:37 a.m., I became the legal owner of Texas Street Holdings and all its assets. I sat in my truck in the parking lot after the closing, holding the deed to Maple Grove Lane. Corinne Whitmore lived at 1247 Maple Grove Lane. Her house was now accessible only by driving on a road that I owned. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. I drove home slowly, taking my time to really look at my new property. The road was in even worse condition than I had realized. There were potholes deep enough to damage a car. The edges were crumbling into the drainage ditches. This was not a road that had been properly maintained for years. But that was about to change. I was going to fix this road and bring it up to proper standards, and I was going to charge the people who used it a fair price for that maintenance. I pulled into my driveway and looked at my gate, the gate that had started this whole conflict, the gate that Corinne had demanded I remove from my own property. I walked over to my mailbox and found another violation notice from the HOA. Corinne was still demanding that I pay $15,000 in fines and remove my gate. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Then I walked back to my house and opened my laptop. I had some correspondence to write. 47 households were about to receive a very interesting letter from their new road owner. I spent the weekend calculating the real cost of maintaining Maple Grove Lane properly. This was not about revenge. This was about business. If I was going to own this road, I was going to do it right. The current road surface was 23 years old and had never been properly maintained. The asphalt was cracked and deteriorating. The storm drainage system was clogged with debris and needed to be completely rebuilt. There were no street lights, no sidewalks, and no proper signage. I got detailed estimates from 3 different contractors. Complete road reconstruction would cost $135,000. Annual maintenance, including crack sealing, pothole repair, and drainage cleaning, would cost about $15,000 per year. Insurance to cover liability for the private road would cost another $8,000 annually. I also discovered that Texas Street Holdings had been paying property taxes on the road easements. That was another $3,000 per year that the homeowners should have been covering. The total annual cost for proper road maintenance was $26,000. Divided by 47 homes, that came to $553 per household per year just for basic maintenance. But the road also needed that major reconstruction project. If I spread that cost over 5 years, it added another $574 per household per year. The math was clear. Each household should be paying about $1,127 annually for proper road maintenance and improvements. The current HOA was collecting $800 per year per household, supposedly for road maintenance, but the road had been deteriorating for years. Where was that money going? I spent Monday morning at the courthouse, pulling the HOA's financial records for the past 5 years. What I found was disturbing. The association had collected over $160,000 in road maintenance fees, but they had only spent about $30,000 on actual road work. The rest had gone to legal fees, administrative costs, and something called reserve funds that seemed to disappear into general operating expenses. Corinne Whitmore and her board had been collecting money for road maintenance and then spending it on other things. Meanwhile, the road continued to deteriorate, and homeowners continued to pay for services they were not receiving. I called Attorney Martinez and asked her to review the fee structure I had calculated. "These numbers look reasonable," she said. "You have legitimate expenses, and you are spreading the costs fairly among all the road users. This is exactly how private road maintenance should work. What about the homeowners who cannot afford the increased fees? You are required to provide reasonable payment plans for people who need them, but you cannot subsidize some users at the expense of others. Everyone who uses the road should pay their fair share. I spent the rest of the week preparing the official notice that would go to all 47 households. The letter had to be professional, clear, and legally compliant. I was not trying to punish anyone. I was simply explaining the new reality of road ownership and maintenance. The letter explained that Texas Street Holdings had been purchased by a new owner. It outlined the current condition of the road, the necessary repairs and maintenance, and the fees required to fund these improvements. Each household would be responsible for $2,847 annually, payable in monthly installments of $237. The new fees would begin on the 1st of October, giving everyone 60 days to adjust their budgets. I also included a detailed breakdown of how the money would be spent. This was not a profit-making venture. Every dollar collected would go directly to road maintenance, insurance, and necessary improvements. On Thursday evening, I printed 47 copies of the letter and put them in certified mail envelopes. Each envelope was addressed to a specific household on Maple Grove Lane. The envelope addressed to Corinne Whitmore at 1247 Maple Grove Lane felt heavier than the others. I dropped all 47 envelopes at the post office on Friday morning. The certified mail receipts would ensure that every household received their notice by Monday or Tuesday. I drove home and parked in my driveway, looking at my gate, the gate that had started this entire conflict. Corinne had spent months demanding that I remove it from my own property because it violated her aesthetic standards. Soon, Corinne would be paying me almost $3,000 per year for the privilege of driving to her house. My phone started ringing at 8:15 on Monday morning. This is Corinne Whitmore. I want to know what kind of scam you are trying to pull with this ridiculous letter. Good morning, Corinne. There is no scam. I am the new owner of Maple Grove Lane, and the letter explains the fees required for proper road maintenance. You cannot charge us $3,000 to drive on our own street. Actually, it is not your street. It is my street, and the fees are based on the actual cost of maintaining the road properly. This is insane. I am calling my lawyer right now. That is your right, but you might want to ask your lawyer to explain how private road ownership works in Texas. She hung up on me. My phone did not stop ringing for the rest of the day. The emergency HOA meeting was called for 7 p.m. on Wednesday evening. I was not invited, but I could see the cars lined up at the community center as I drove past. Every parking space was full, and people were standing outside in heated conversations. My phone had been ringing constantly since Monday. Some callers were angry, some were confused, and a few were actually supportive. Several homeowners thanked me for finally addressing the road maintenance issues that the HOA had been ignoring for years. But Corinne was not giving up without a fight. She called me Tuesday morning with a different approach. I have been thinking about our situation, she said, her voice much calmer than before. Perhaps we can work out some kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? The HOA could take over maintenance of the road. We could pay you a reasonable price for the company, and then we would handle everything going forward. How much were you thinking? Well, you paid $70,000 for the company. We could pay you $75,000, and then the road would belong to the community. I almost laughed. Karen, the road needs $135,000 in immediate repairs, plus ongoing maintenance costs of about $26,000 per year. Your offer does not even cover the initial investment required. Those numbers are ridiculous. The road is fine. The road is 23 years old and falling apart. When was the last time the HOA actually spent money on road maintenance? She was quiet for a long moment. We have been setting aside money for major repairs. Where is that money now? It is in our reserve fund. How much is in the reserve fund? Another long pause. About $12,000. Karen, you have been collecting $800 per year from 47 homes for road maintenance. That is almost $38,000 annually. Where has that money been going? Administrative costs, legal fees, other community expenses. In other words, you have been collecting money for road maintenance and spending it on other things. The HOA has many responsibilities. The road is not my problem anymore, Karen. It is your problem. You and your neighbors can pay the fees I have established, or you can find another way to get to your houses. She hung up on me again. The real fireworks started on Thursday morning when Karen's attorney called. Mr. Thompson, this is William Hayes. I represent the Shadow Creek HOA. We believe your fee structure is unreasonable and potentially illegal. What specifically do you think is illegal? You are charging punitive fees in retaliation for the HOA's enforcement actions against your property. Mr. Hayes, I have detailed documentation of all road maintenance costs. Every fee I am charging is based on legitimate expenses. This has nothing to do with the HOA dispute. We are prepared to file an injunction to block your fee increases. That is your right, but you should know that I am also prepared to close the road for major reconstruction if the fees are not paid. The road is in dangerous condition, and I have liability concerns. There was a long pause. You cannot close a road that provides the only access to 47 homes. Actually, I can. Texas law allows private road owners to temporarily close roads for necessary maintenance and repairs. If I cannot collect the fees needed to maintain the road safely, then I have no choice but to close it until the work can be completed. That would be a violation of the homeowner's easement rights. No, it would be responsible road ownership. I have an obligation to maintain the road in safe condition. If I cannot afford to do that because people refuse to pay their fair share, then closing the road is the only option that protects me from liability. Hayes hung up without saying goodbye. Friday morning brought a new development. I was drinking coffee on my front porch when I saw Karen's car driving slowly past my gate. She was taking pictures again, just like she had been doing for months. But this time, I was taking pictures too. I had installed security cameras around my property, and I was documenting every instance of harassment. An hour later, my phone rang. This is Karen. I want to make you an offer. I am listening. If you will reduce the road fees to something reasonable, like $1,200 per year, I will drop all HOA enforcement actions against your gate. I sat back in my chair, amazed by the audacity of her offer. Karen, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me to subsidize your road maintenance in exchange for you stopping your illegal harassment of my property. It is not illegal harassment. Your gate violates the HOA covenants. Actually, it does not. I had my attorney research the original covenants, and they do not apply to my property. You have been harassing me for months based on rules that have no legal authority over my land. That is not true. It is completely true. And now you want me to give you a discount on road fees in exchange for stopping harassment that you had no right to engage in. We can fight this in court. You can try, but while you are fighting, you will still need to pay your road fees. And if you do not pay them, I will close the road for reconstruction. You are bluffing. Try me. That afternoon, I received a certified letter from William Hayes. The HOA was filing suit to challenge my road fees and seeking an injunction to prevent me from closing the road. I forwarded the letter to Attorney Martinez and asked her to prepare our response. The war was just getting started. The legal battle lasted 3 months. Karen and the HOA spent thousands of dollars trying to prove that my road fees were unreasonable or retaliatory. They hired engineers to challenge my cost estimates and lawyers to argue that I was violating the homeowner's easement rights. But the facts were on my side. I had legitimate expenses, detailed documentation, and a clear legal right to set fees for road maintenance. The judge ruled in my favor on every major issue. The turning point came when the court ordered an independent assessment of the road's condition. The county engineer who conducted the evaluation confirmed that Maple Grove Lane was in dangerous condition and needed immediate major repairs. This road should have been completely reconstructed years ago, he testified. The current surface is a safety hazard, and the drainage system is completely inadequate. The judge's final ruling was clear. I had the right to set reasonable fees for road maintenance, and the fees I had established were justified by the actual costs involved. Karen's legal challenge had failed completely. But the real victory came in the months that followed. As I began collecting the road maintenance fees and starting the reconstruction project, something interesting happened. Most of the homeowners were actually grateful for the improvements. The new asphalt was smooth and properly graded. The storm drainage system actually worked during heavy rains. I installed LED street lights that made the neighborhood safer at night. The road looked better than it had in 20 years. Several neighbors stopped by to thank me for finally addressing problems that had been ignored for years. We have been asking the HOA to fix these potholes for ages, one homeowner told me. It is nice to finally see someone who actually follows through. Karen made one final attempt to cause trouble. She filed a complaint with the county claiming that I was operating an illegal business. The county inspector came out, reviewed all my documentation, and determined that private road maintenance was perfectly legal. 2 months later, Karen put her house up for sale. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning. By Friday afternoon, she had accepted an offer from a young family who were excited about the newly improved road and well-maintained neighborhood. Karen moved out in January. I watched from my front porch as the moving truck pulled away from 1247 Maple Grove Lane. That evening, I walked out to my gate and stood there looking at my property. The gate that had caused so much trouble was still there, exactly where I had built it. The HOA enforcement actions had been quietly dropped after Karen's departure. My phone rang as I was standing there. "Mr. Thompson, this is Janet Rodriguez. I am the new HOA president. I wanted to call and introduce myself." "Nice to meet you, Janet. I also wanted to thank you for the road improvements. The neighborhood looks fantastic, and everyone is very happy with the quality of the work." "I am glad to hear that. I hope we can have a better relationship going forward. The previous administration made some mistakes, and we want to focus on working together for the good of the community.